If I recall, somebody recommended back in the winter to go get a transfer quarterback. Now the Iowa Hawkeyes are just about forced to go get a transfer quarterback. Welcome into Hawkeyes Live right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you being here. Pull up for the next 60 with Corey Brada and myself. You can catch Corey's work on a regular basis every day there at From the Hawkeye of the Storm. Corey, how you doing today? You finished your banana and you are ready to roll. Get that energy boost.
I'm a little bit under the weather today, Mark, but not really. I needed a little bit of potassium to get me going this next hour.
Thank you for being here.
It seems like every time I kind of have a day where I'm not feeling the best is when all this news floods forth. So I'm just kind of taking it one step at a time. Of course, the news about Deacon Hill, news about Cale Vanderbush. We have the spring practice we've recapped it. I know you posted some content to this channel after I called into your main show Saturday. And of course, I did a 2-hour show with Don Patterson. Lots to get to. I mean, this is a busy time. You got about a week left of this portal window being open. So players got to get their names in now unless they're graduates. And let me make sure I'm very clear on that. Unless they're graduates, because Iowa doesn't have to be below 86 scholarships by the end of the portal window being open. They got to be down to 85 by the time we hit fall. So is it possible they could get to 86 or 87 and then need to, lose one more guy? That's possible. And it's always possible that some graduate leaves. And I mean, there's a couple of guys that come to mind that came back that I think a lot of Iowa fans look at and say, I wish this guy wasn't taking up a scholarship, but he has experience. Kirk obviously feels really strongly about a guy who has experience and longevity and who's paid their dues. So we'll see. We're down to 87 now. 87 people on scholarship with Vanderbush and Hill in the portal, and got to get down to 85.
You heard it from Corey. I'm sure we will touch upon what Corey took in on Saturday. However, we've got a video posted here for the exhaustive deep dive. Head on over to From the Hawkeye of the Storm, Corey and Coach Don Patterson with the spring practice recap. All right, let's get to it. Deacon Hill, and let's separate the personal from the player. Do not wish any harm or anything negative on Deacon Hill. Hope he is successful going forward, develops his skills, and is able to find a competitive place to go play football and reaches his goals. However, I would believe that most people that are watching and listening right now and will be in the next couple of days are fairly satisfied that Deacon Hill is moving on. Now, the question will be, what does Iowa do in response, and what are the options and opportunities there?
What are the options or opportunities there, Mark?
Okay.
I mean, I got a couple of names that come to mind. I know you feel very strongly about the idea that Iowa should have went to the portal at quarterback back in the winter. And I was not in agreement with you on that. But it wasn't because I thought Deacon Hill was the answer. I can tell you that. And in hindsight, yeah, it'd be nice to have another guy in there. Now, maybe it pays off because having less guys got more snaps to a guy like Marco Lainez, who has really good upside and athleticism. But they also need somebody this fall camp. And Cade McNamara, Kirk said yesterday that he believes Cade is going to be ready for June. But he didn't look very good Saturday. Looked very ginger when moving side to side, and a little bit of action we saw from him. He was not involved in 11-on-11s. So, yeah, I mean, lots of stuff to uncover. I think the intriguing prospect for me, a couple of them. One is Brendan Sullivan from Northwestern. That one surprised me. Tim Lester offered him when Lester was the head coach at Western Michigan. So there's a connection there. He entered the portal right after Deacon Hill did. Not saying there's any direct correlation there. And he's a starting Big Ten. I mean, I think he was probably going to be the starter there this year. So I'd be surprised if he would come to Iowa, with some idea that he's likely going to be the backup behind Cade McNamara. Why would he do that? I don't know. He's a graduate, so I think he's got 1 year left, right? So I don't know. Your take, Mark?
Okay. So, yes, it was my strong recommendation to pursue a quarterback in the portal back in December. And we would be here for the next 90 minutes listing and also evaluating the quarterbacks who have been selected by other teams since the end of last season. And I know that some of those quarterbacks may be out of Iowa's reach, but this is a top 15 to 25 program in the country. So they should be able to go get a capable quarterback. They have not had one start since Nathan Stanley walked off campus. So there were a ton of options out there. They stayed with what they have. And if Cade McNamara plays the great majority of the season against all the key opponents and is the quarterback that we saw for a season and a half at Michigan, all is well. They will be receiving capable quarterback play. But again, he's a bit brittle, or has proven to be in the last 2 years. And a guy like Brendan Sullivan, like you, I just looked at his numbers a few minutes ago. He's thrown, and I did, like you, anticipate him being the starter at Northwestern. He has played quite a bit the last 2 seasons. Ben Bryant, the transfer in from Cincinnati, was a little bit better of a player and was the main starter, but he got banged up from time to time. Brendan Sullivan has thrown 200 passes in the Big Ten, so he has experience, and he is completing, Iowa fans, could you get used to this? 69% of his passes over the course of 200 thrown. So he's not bad. He may be able to compete with Cade McNamara if the coaches are able to, and considering their job roles, I would hope that they would be able to take off all bias considering what Cade McNamara has accomplished and just say, let these quarterbacks play in August and let's evaluate them. And if that's the situation, they bring in Brendan Sullivan. I don't necessarily know that he's the answer, but I think he's a capable competitor for the number 1 job.
Who's the other quarterback competing with Sullivan at Northwestern, or who has been the other quarterback at Northwestern?
Well, they had Ben Bryant, who was a transfer in from Cincinnati a couple years ago, and he has basically been the starting quarterback the last 2 years.
So he's got another year. Bryant does?
No, he's gone. He's gone.
Okay, so who competed with Sullivan this spring is what
I got to tell you, it's going to be a name that it is not going to surprise me, because I rated the Big Ten quarterbacks and I delivered my rankings, and albeit I did have Sullivan maybe at the bottom, maybe last, second to last, but he's a pretty capable player. I know that doesn't sound hopeful. I know Iowa fans, you don't want to be acquiring the worst starting quarterback in the Big Ten, but he's in a group of players and certainly could develop and be better. But I got to tell you, I don't recall who else that would be. I thought he was going to be the starting quarterback.
Well, that's what I bring up, because I guess the one conceivable way I could hypothesize that, hey, maybe or speculate that maybe Sullivan entered with an eye to Iowa, and that's a long shot. But I guess if there was a younger guy who was pushing him and he felt like it was 50-50 heading into the summer, he may feel like he's got as good of a chance at Iowa. Maybe he feels like he's got a 50-50 chance at Iowa, so why compete at Northwestern when he's got a better team and perhaps a coach that he has more faith in? And remember, Northwestern had a coaching change as well since he got there. So maybe it's possible. I mean, it's possible. I don't know why Iowa wouldn't pursue him, especially with the Lester connection. Quarterbacks have not been there's not been a ton of quarterbacks in the portal this post-spring period. So where would Deacon Hill rank on portal quarterbacks that are available right now, Mark?
Well, we're going to find out where all these major services rank him.
I guess he's top 10. My guess is that he's top 10, because I don't think there are that many out there.
Oh, yeah. He's in the top, 5 or 6 right now.
That's crazy. That's crazy. But that's the reality of it. Now, there's a kid from UCLA that is somewhat intriguing.
Colin Schley.
I think he's a guy to look at, to watch for. After that, I mean, I really don't know. I haven't. I mean, Jaden Rashad is not coming to Iowa. I saw somebody in the chat earlier bring that up. Wouldn't that be something? But that's not happening.
He's visiting Georgia this weekend.
Oh, well, there you go. And by the way, Colin Schley is visiting Virginia Tech this weekend. So, I mean, he's got other Power 5 interest.
He would be the backup there. They have an entrenched starter at Virginia Tech.
Well, he was
is
the
not
backup.
going to be the starter there.
He was the backup at UCLA.
He got his opportunities, maybe because of injury. I don't recall, but he played there too. He played about as much as Sullivan played.
I don't know that I'd be doing cartwheels for either guy. But, I mean, they need a body. And I know some people are just going to say, Corey, you're looking through the same demented glasses still. I'm not giving up on Marco Linez pushing Cade McNamara in the end.
You love that guy.
Listen, I'm not saying he's the guy. I'm just simply saying, I've said it a million times. He's as electric on the ground as we've seen from an Iowa quarterback since Brad Banks. You do not have to have the biggest arm to be a successful quarterback at this level.
Now, this is funny because a couple of people in the chat are saying former South Carolina quarterback Ryan Helinski is at Northwestern. Okay, that is the first name that came to mind. Ryan Helinski. I've known about Ryan Helinski. I was watching Ryan Helinski in 2018. That's how long he's been in college football. He was a part-time, kind of fill-in if somebody's injured, but kind of wrestled the job away. He's had a very similar path as like a Brendan Sullivan at South Carolina. He was again, battling for the starting job at Northwestern for the last few seasons. I kind of assumed he was gone because he's been playing forever, but I guess he's still there. So maybe Ryan Helinski played well in the spring and Brendan Sullivan saw the writing on the wall.
Jackson in the chat says he wonders if Auburn can get Deacon Hill. That's what Jackson said. Is Jackson joking? Usually Jackson's not joking when he's in the chat.
Usually he's not. He's a hardcore football guy. They've got Peyton Thorne. Unless he got hurt that I missed something.
It'll be interesting to see who comes calling for Deacon Hill. Remember, Deacon Hill was committed to Fordham before he flipped to Iowa a year ago. So I'm just saying, like, that's the reality of it.
This program is so well run in about 80% of the areas.
Right.
Why are they signing quarterbacks from Fordham?
I'll just say this again, that Tim Lester is not Brian Ferentz or Ken O'Keefe or Greg Davis. He is Tim Lester. So I hope
no reflection on him.
Yeah, I hope that we've turned the corner with that, right? I saw somebody on social media talking about it today, and it's something that I've expressed a number of times. Go back and look at the quarterbacks, Mark, that have left Iowa in the last 5-6 years. I mean, we're talking Spencer Petras, who ended up transferring to Utah State. Alex Padilla, who went to SMU and proceeded to be buried on the Mustangs depth chart. Joe Labus, who's now at Central Michigan. Deuce Hogan, who transferred to Kentucky, never could earn a scholarship. He's now at New Mexico State. And then Carson May, who transferred to, I think, like Coffeyville and then to Wyoming, and now he's back in the portal again without a home. So, like, yeah, I saw somebody on social media point that out and say, well, this is clearly not an issue with development. It's an issue with recruiting. I don't know that you can't just make bland black and white statements like that, because it could be both, right? Like, a couple of these guys had 4 stars in front of their names in the rankings. Now, those rankings aren't an exact science, but guys like May and, Alex Padilla had an offer at one time from Georgia. I know we bring that up. Deuce Hogan was a decently touted kid. So is it possible, I'm not saying it's probable, but possible, that these are decent prospects when they get recruited, but they come to Iowa, and during those first 2 to 3 years, during a crucial period of development time in their careers, they are not developed well at Iowa. And so obviously they're going to be behind the 8 ball when they up and leave and go somewhere else. So maybe there's a degree of talent there wasted, but I would also have to think, Mark, that it's likely they also don't evaluate very well. And so I think it's a combination of both. You don't become as bad as they have been in pass offense and in quarterback play unless it's a combination of deficiencies.
I was under the impression at the time that Hogan and May were fairly highly thought of recruits and supposed to, out of all the names that you listed, those are the two that stand out
Yeah,
as there being expectation.
right. I mean, and remember, they were very close on Zach Wilson. They had a chance. They were this close with Zach Wilson. So it's like, I don't believe it's just all evaluation or all development. It's a combination of things. Do you think Zach Wilson would be in the NFL right now? I know he's not had a great career so far, but he was drafted very high. You think he'd be in the NFL? I think it would have been a first round draft pick had he signed on with Iowa instead of BYU.
Probably not, just because of the opportunity in showing his skills
Well, maybe opportunity, but also partially
and
because of lack
development.
of development.
Yeah.
I mean, again, Petrus and Zach Wilson were considered kind of peers. Iowa took Petrus over Zach Wilson. So maybe that's on Iowa, but there's got to be a portion of this that we look at and say, hey, they got an issue developing these kids when they get to campus. And that's reflected too in statements in the past by people like Brian and Kirk when they've made comments like it takes a year and a half, or 2 years to learn this offense fully. That's one question I look forward to asking Tim Lester in the fall. How long should it take a hardworking young quarterback to pick up the offense to where he's at least palpable? And I'll be anxious to hear what he says on that because I'm guessing he's not going to say a year and a half.
And the connection you're making between evaluation and development makes total sense, because just think about, can you envision a scout who is able to spot great talent but has no idea what to do with it past that? Of course not. Or that you can develop, once you're handed the player, that you are a master at developing them, but you can't spot it. No, those two things go hand in hand.
Exactly. So I'm not saying that any of the guys I just listed would be winning Heisman trophies in the SEC or somewhere, or Ohio State. Iowa does not recruit on that level. Not claiming they do, but they do recruit on the same level as teams like BYU and Iowa State and other places where successful quarterbacks have been groomed in recent years. And so, where does Iowa turn now? They've got James Rezar, the freshman coming in from Florida, here in the next couple of months. I think chances of a true freshman starting with any Kirk Ferentz-led team is slim to none, and as Hayden Fry would say, slim left town. I don't think that's happening, but they got to keep working with Marco. I know we're big on this whole portal thing, but you can't put all your chips in on the portal. Like, they can go and try to get somebody, but it's also possible that they could swing and miss. It's possible Cade McNamara goes down with an injury because of his history, and the other guy could go down with the injury. They got to get everybody ready, and that's what Tim Lester's job is as a quarterback's coach, obviously, but it's something we've not seen with this program and this offense in recent years. Not everybody has not been ready. That's why you saw so many poor performances from people like Deacon Hill and Spencer Petras with nobody behind them to relieve them or help, because they had no developed depth at that quarterback position. And it's the same thing with wide receiver. You mentioned like 80% of the program, how well managed it is. You hit the nail on the head, because it's incredible. I don't think there's a program in the country. We've talked about the disparity between Iowa's defense year in and year out with Iowa's offense year in and year out. Is there another program in the country that has such a disparity with level of performance between with quarterback and receiver, and then every other position? I mean, literally every other position. Now, offensive line hasn't been great, but think about how bad those two positions have performed. And we've seen the results, the fruits of that via the portal. All these receivers just hauling butt out of the portal from Iowa year after year. Same thing with quarterback. And I know quarterbacks enter from everywhere if they're not playing. But again, you would think if this was a capable offense and a capable passing attack, the quarterbacks would look at this and say, hey, nobody's done it. If I'm good enough, I can do it. There's something missing there. Obviously, hopefully Tim Lester can figure that out. He is figuring that out.
Yeah, Wisconsin is a much more to the mean example of Iowa. They're kind of in that same mold, but they're much more balanced, much more capable offensively in the passing game from year to year, but have not been, as of late, as consistent on defense as Iowa. Here are experienced quarterbacks with power for playing time. Jaden Rashada not coming. Here's one for you. You'll love this one. Jeff Sims. Yeah, you don't want him.
I think I saw he's taking a visit somewhere, isn't he, this weekend?
Arizona State.
Okay.
And yeah, he is not Kirk's kind of player. No.
No.
Too loose with a football and runs
Yeah,
around.
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then other than that, like your guy Cooper Legas.
Mark. Lagasse.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't watch that game against Utah State.
Yeah, I tell you, if they just trade with Utah State, that won't bode very well, I don't think. Cooper Lagasse was okay last year at Utah State, but I mean, were his numbers? What did he do last year? I'm guessing his completion percentage was well below 60. Let me look it up. I don't want to speak out of turn here. Somebody brought him up the other day, but I don't think people are beating down his door.
Cooper Lagasse last year, 64.8%.
Okay.
1,815 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 8 picks.
I stand corrected. Those are pretty good numbers.
Yeah.
Albeit against the Mountain West. Played 9 games, so I'm guessing he got hurt. Also ran for 122 yards, which is impressive, and has ran for 411 yards in his career, and that's pretty darn good in college.
He put it up 48 times against Iowa in that game.
Yeah, I don't know why they threw the ball so much.
They only lost by 10, right? 24-14? That comes to mind, that score.
I think that's right, yeah. It was not a blowout. If anybody was at that game, it was not a blowout.
But this is Iowa's defense for you. He went 32 of 48. Nothing wrong with that. 213 yards. They're tackling everything after a 5-yard gain.
Yeah, and he was a little bit, let me look at his, a little bit up and down. I mean, he was, let's see, I mean, he really didn't turn the ball over very much. He never threw more than 2 picks in a game. Now, 48 attempts is obviously on the high end of everything he did. Had 40 attempts against Fresno State. Almost everything else was down in the teens as far as pass attempts. He did have a game against Colorado State where he threw 29 times, threw 33 times against Nevada, and then everything else was less. So I don't know. I haven't studied his film. I mean, I was mildly impressed with him at Iowa. He's a little small, I think, but I mean, I don't think McNamara is much taller. I think Lagasse, I saw there, is listed at 6'1". McNamara is probably no bigger than 6'2". Linez is no bigger than 6'1", 6'2". You don't have to be a big guy. Just like this kid they have, I know someone mentioned it in the chat, this kid they've got coming in from the FCS level. I believe he's scheduled to, I think he's visiting right now, I think. This little 5'8", I said little, I apologize to him. 5'8" receiver though, Mark. And actually, you know what? That excites me because of something that Don Patterson has said to me in the past, and actually a number of times on the air, that sometimes coaches make too big of a deal out of how tall a guy is as a receiver. And you look at some of the more electric guys in the league. The one example people like to use, and rightfully so, is Tyreek Hill. If you're explosive, good speed can account for, lack of size, lack of height. And they just got rid of, he left Jacob Bostic, who was 6'4", big receiver. They've got Dayton Howard, who's a big receiver. Jarrett Bowie's like 6'2", 6'3". Now, who will emerge at the X position? Who knows? Caleb Brown's not the biggest. Seth Anderson's, 6 foot, 6'1". Caden Weegen's not the biggest either. This kid, though, that they're bringing in on Tuesday, I believe he's 5'8". Raylan Sharp from Missouri State. He initially was at Houston. Now, the only thing that when I saw his profile, the only thing that left me a little bit concerned, let me pull this up here for people who are curious. And again, I've not went through and looked at tape for Raylan Sharp, but his size doesn't concern me. All right. His size does not concern me. What concerns me a little bit, and I'm sure that Kirk looks at this as well, is that at high school, he had a couple decent offers. Actually, an offer from Arizona, got an offer from SMU, actually originally committed to SMU. About 6 or 7 months later, he decommits, ends up at Houston. Then he enters the transfer portal again, goes to Missouri State, And according to this timeline on 247, he entered the portal back in November, withdrew from the portal, and it's now back in the portal again. A little bit indecisive there, and that probably throws some red flags up, but they are getting him to campus. I think he's got a couple other places he wants to go. Maybe they could get him to commit on the spot. That'd be great. But I don't think they're going to be able to. Cade Board, there's the offensive lineman that committed on Saturday after the practice. He's coming in as a preferred walk-on. My guess is they're not going to be able to get this kid as a preferred walk-on. So you got to give him a scholarship. But you know what? Again, hopefully I would assume most of the recruiting momentum and direction that they're heading right now is from Tim Lester. And that should at least give fans something to put their trust in. It's no longer led by Brian Ferentz and Kelton Copeland, these skill position players. Maybe, I'm sure John Budmeier's involved, but I'm guessing that Tim Lester is the heavy voice behind the scenes.
Well, I do think that your hope is legitimate, that things are different and will be different under Tim Lester. I think that he has enough credibility and a track record to show maybe he can evaluate quarterbacks better, develop them better, plan out the offense, scheme the offense, do all those things that are required of an offensive coordinator to succeed in what is arguably the best conference in college football. Timmy McClain is a backup quarterback at UCF, and I'm pretty up on the transfer portal only because we've been doing these updates every day at 3:00 Eastern time. So I'm just running through these names and looking these guys over. And he's basically been the backup quarterback the last 2 years under UCF. Gus Malzahn, John Rice Plumlee, the starter there at UCF. And he threw for about 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 3 picks last year. Mid 60%, 65% range. He would be the other guy with experience. Other than that, like Jacoby Criswell was supposed to be an outstanding quarterback around the time that Sam Howell was the guy at North Carolina, never broke into the starting lineup there. Of course, Travis May at North Carolina. Then he went to Arkansas, didn't get the job. He's in the portal. And there was somebody else who caught my eye, but again, another inexperienced quarterback.
And just so people are aware, Raylan Sharp, I think he had about 1,000 yards receiving last year. So he was productive, FCS level. But we know Iowa, that hasn't changed thus far. For the most part, they're going to attack the FCS and G5. So like the idea that they would even contact Jalen Rashada is slim and none, I think. Now, they went after Caleb Brown and got him. That was a unique situation. Now, as far as, Mark, do we want to take a moment, because we did promise our people a week ago that we would briefly preview the offensive line, because spring practice completed on Saturday, and I told you I didn't really want to talk about the O-line until we got a look at it in person. Do you mind if we run through
Absolutely
some of the takeaways there? So obviously, Jennings, Dunker, Logan Jones remain out. Sounds like they're going to be fine. I'm guessing that by even next month, they'll be good to go, if not by June. So I would expect Dunker with Proctor gone, Richmond lined up at left tackle, that Dunker will be your right tackle. Even though I've been told by other people that they think Dunker is more natural at guard. Sounds like he's going to remain at right tackle. So you have Richmond and Dunker, 2 tackle spots. I thought Richmond played pretty well Saturday at times. Jack Dotzler did not. I thought most of the pressure that guys like Deacon Hill received, even Linez, I think at times, was from that left side. So, they'll have to keep working on that. I'm sure Kirk's going to be heavily involved once we get to fall camp, as always, and those guys will benefit from yet another summer. However, this whole group, Mark, is no longer young. We've been talking about that for like 2-3 years, how young they are. They're like sprinkled with 5th and 6th year seniors. They're not young at all. They're old. They're like you, Mark. So I'm just joking, of course. Love you, Mark. The point is, Jennings, Dunker, Josh Janowski just got to campus, so he's working with probably the 3s right now, maybe mixing in with the 2s a little bit. Bo Stevens is back healthy. He missed a lot of time last year. Tyler Ellsbury's working at center with Jones out. Cade Piper emerged late last year. I really didn't notice much from him on Saturday, but maybe that's a good thing. He didn't stand out in a bad way. And then Nick DeYoung is healthy. I know a lot of Iowa fans were kind of upset that they give him a scholarship for a 6th year. He's a former walk-on himself. So, maybe one of those guys really comes on and becomes the stalwart. They need somebody without Proctor to become that representative of that line. Cade Borrett is the center from North Dakota, who was a freshman All-American at the FCS level a year ago. He's coming in as a preferred walk-on. He played high school football with Xavier Wampa, Caden Proctor, and all those guys. But went to North Dakota, played really well, and now is back at Iowa. Obviously wants to be because he's paying for his scholarship. We assume the Swarm's not picking up the money for his scholarship that they don't have to give out. I don't know if I'm missing anybody. I mean, Jeremy Chaplin's still at Iowa. Michael Myslinski just can't stay healthy. He was not on the field Saturday. I don't know what's going on with him. Tom Kakert made the statement after the practice that he does, and he was maybe exaggerating a little bit, but he said, I don't think I've ever seen Michael Myslinski in uniform. And I in my first reaction, it sounded funny to me that he said that, but then I'm like, he's right. Like, he has been riddled with injuries, and I know a lot of people liked him coming out of high school. They got him. I believe they either flipped him for Michigan State or it was down to Iowa, Michigan State. And ever since 2021, when he redshirted, he has just been dinged up. He's an academic all Big Ten guy 2 years in a row. He's obviously a very intelligent young man, but just can't stay healthy. So, boy, it'd be nice to have some luxury there at center. But proof's going to be in the pudding. There's just no more excuses for this unit up front, and no more excuses for George Barnett. I mean, yeah, they lost Caden Proctor. Who does the blame lie on there? I mean, you got to figure out how to work with this very experienced group. Trevor Lauk was a 4-star. Maybe he can emerge as a second-year guy. He is young, but he's been around the program for a year now. Connor Colby's another one. I don't think I mentioned him. Mentioned Dotzler struggled. Cale Crow is a kid from just south of me here in Story County that apparently has been buried. Do they lose somebody there in the portal? Maybe. I don't want to take guesses as to who that may be. I wouldn't be shocked, and it might be to the benefit of the program if one of those guys that's buried leaves because they need the scholarships. And there's a couple of guys that we just haven't seen headway since they got to campus.
It happens fast, by the way, Corey. You go from being young and thinking you're young to one day you wake up and all of a sudden. So just remember that. Someday you'll think, that guy I used to do that show with, what was he? The mouth of college? What was he? The mouth of college foot? Whatever he was. He told me that it happens in a hurry.
It won't be me forgetting what your moniker was. It'll be you forgetting.
That could be. Yes.
No.
YouTube's a new entity, relatively speaking, but some of us may be here at 80 years old and still, YouTube channels and being like, I don't even remember what's our name.
What are we doing here?
What are we doing here? Start talking about like the 1986 Rose Bowl all the time. I'm going to throw something out here because, of course, we would take our jabs at Brian Ferentz, and he deserved much of it in regards to his stay as an offensive coordinator, but his expertise along the offensive line. I know he wasn't coaching the position as of late, but could that be missed?
What do you mean missed? What do you mean by that? Could it be
quote unquote expertise, his knowledge of offensive line play?
The offensive line has sucked for years. It's sucked for 3 straight years. They've been awful. The O-line has not been good, Mark. When he was the OC here, the O-line was not good.
Okay, I was just checking.
The O-line was better when he was coaching the O-line, but it has declined. So, no, I mean, I'm sure, he's got expertise as a former center and former player at center. But, no, I could they benefit from it? Would be such a disaster to bring him in as an analyst. I mean, like, from a PR standpoint, that would be – Kirk Ferentz is supposed to be the O-line guru here. Now, here's something I thought about yesterday or the day before. It was announced that Gary Dolphin's partner, Ed Podolak, Iowa Hawkeye great Ed Podolak, who's been on Iowa radio networks for years, that he is stepping away and is taking on a lesser role, will provide some pregame analysis, for the Hawkeye Radio Network. But that means that the University of Iowa is looking for a new analyst alongside Gary Dolphin. I don't know how long Gary Dolphin has in the booth anymore either. But how about this for a name, Mark? To sit alongside Gary Dolphin, Brian Ferentz. Brian Ferentz.
Is he a good communicator?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you've heard him communicate, Mark. You've heard him communicate. I think he likes to filibuster, but I just think it would be such an intriguing thing. Now, the university will never do that, but I think it would be such an intriguing thing to have him alongside Gary because he's got no problem talking. He likes to sound like he knows a lot about football, which I have no doubt that he does know a lot about football. But wouldn't it be interesting when he's the guy that Iowa kind of that the fan base kind of ran out of town, if he returned in that role, an innocent role, right? He's not involved in coaching. But could it almost be like a redemption story if he returned to be alongside the voice of the Iowa Hawkeyes? Like, if he returned, let loose of his pride and was like, you know what? These are my roots. I'm returning to it if they'll let me. And I'm going to be because you got to be a Hawkeye homer to be next to Gary Dolphin. You get like Gary Dolphin's a Hawkeye homer. Like I try to, I know I'm a homer too in a lot of regards. I try to be somewhat objective. Gary's got to be a homer. It's kind of in his contract. So whoever's sitting next to him has to be a homer as well. It won't ever happen, but I think it's an intriguing idea.
Well, for him to match and then surpass the negativity that he has left with the Iowa fan base, he would have to hold down that role for like 30 years.
Oh, I don't know about that. If the offense is successful with Tim Lester and Brian can at least become a non-adversarial figure, right? Like that's, I think, what we're talking about. We're not talking about him becoming some beloved person like Kirk, but a non-adversarial figure. Now, here's another one. I mean, Don Patterson would be terrific at the job, but Don Patterson's 72 years old. I mean, they're not probably going to be hiring a 72-year-old. Don's been working with ESPN. I mentioned a couple of names here, and Mark, if you got one, feel free to throw it out there. Danon Hughes, I'd at least call Danon. Danon's been working radio with the Chiefs for quite a while. He does Big Ten Network stuff for baseball. He would be a guy I'd at least call. He's probably happy down in Kansas City doing stuff for the Chiefs, but he's a Hawkeye. Give him a call. Paul Brandstetter. My goodness. Am I thinking of politics now? Paul Burmeister, who I believe is on Notre Dame radio, former Hawkeye QB. Again, I'm guessing Notre Dame might be able to pay a little bit better, but he's a former Hawkeye. I mean, he's got great experience. I'd be giving him a call. And then the other one is Chuck Long. He's got broadcasting experience. I know maybe things aren't real great between Kirk and Chuck. I don't know what their relationship is right now, but I mean, he's so recognizable. He's a Heisman finalist at Iowa. People know his voice. Like, I don't know that he's big enough of a homer. He's been very critical of certain things over recent years. I don't listen to the radio a ton now, but I would like for him to be alongside Gary. I think it'd be a great tandem.
I would like to serve up for the chat. Don't go to Google. Do not go to Google. What is Ed Podolak's greatest claim to fame? I don't think there's any question about this based on my knowledge of the sport. I might be wrong, but I think this is pretty clear cut. Ed Podolak's greatest claim to fame. So we'll leave that to the chat too.
It's not when he got pulled. Didn't he get arrested for OWI or
no.
Not
this
OWI.
Is not a negative thing.
Public intox. I think it was when he was with the Chiefs, right? Something he did with the Chiefs.
Yeah, he had a remarkable triple overtime, double overtime game. It's the longest game in the history of the NFL in the 71 playoffs. Dolphins Chiefs. He had a remarkable game, like a kickoff, return touchdown, receiving touchdown, scored like 3 different times, 3 different ways, something like that. And but the Dolphins won on a Garo Yepremian field goal to win the longest game in NFL history, which still stands.
Okay. A couple other good names in the chat. Maybe a Chad Greenway. Iowa is in the process of recruiting his daughter, Madden Greenway, to play basketball at Iowa. but it's kind of an aside. And then Dallas Clark has been seen around Iowa events a lot lately with Caitlin Clark. He's a guy. Has he done any broadcasting you're aware of, like NFL wise?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Yeah. So, but maybe he is. I mean, I think I was thinking of Tony Gonzalez. But anyways, yeah, those are good names. I'm thinking of guys who have experience or beloved guys like Brian Ferentz.
We have a couple of people mentioning Brendan Sullivan to Iowa. Please check out the beginning of the live stream. We have covered that ground in regards to the Deacon Hill transfer portal entry and what could lie ahead for the Hawkeyes in their decisions and pursuits in that direction. They would be walking on thin ice if they do not address this in any way and go into next season with Cade McNamara as the starting quarterback and Marco Lyoness as the backup.
By the way, thank you, Hawkeye Bernie and T. Hank, for bringing it up. Kyler Kasper is a name to watch. I have not had any conversations with Kyler or his camp. However, he has not broken through at Oregon. Now, maybe he ends up being on the two deeps. That's possible. But he's a guy common sense. I don't think there's any intel out there for sure that he's entering the portal. But Oregon doesn't play their spring game until Saturday. And, maybe once that spring game is over, he makes a decision to hop in the portal. I don't really think it makes a whole lot of sense for a person to hop in the portal before the spring game unless they're completely buried. Like Jacob Bostic did it, but why wouldn't you want to show off, especially if your game is nationally televised? I guess with Bostic, he's probably thinking, our game's not on TV anyways. Our practice isn't on television anyways. And by the way, I wanted to ask Kirk that question on Saturday. I've got to, I didn't ask him that question. I will at some point. I am curious on it, why Iowa doesn't televise the spring practice like every other school does. But Oregon, we'll see. That'd be a name to watch. Would he come to Iowa? Who knows? But he's a big body receiver. So if you're talking about, imagine adding, how about this for a tandem, Mark? Caleb Brown, Kyler Kasper, and then this kid from Missouri State who's like 5'8". Like, talk about some, there's some serious difference in size with those three guys. Let's just say that. And then they're going to have a guy like Caden Weegan and Terrell Washington are going to be, I thought Saturday, both those guys looked like they're going to be on the two deeps at some point. I don't know. Maybe they won't show up on the two deeps, but I think they're both going to be used kind of Swiss Army knives in the offense. Both guys can probably be used out of the backfield. It'll be interesting to see how much Iowa uses a lot of motion. We saw that quite a bit on Saturday, that having guys with speed like Weegan, like Washington, like Brown will help in that regard. I think one of the reasons people were freaking out about this whole Kyler Kasper thing is he did post on his Instagram story. He reposted Caleb Johnson's post from spring ball. And it was something like he had his fingers, it was like a finger crossed emoji, Kyler Kasper. Why would he maybe he's friends with Caleb Johnson. Caleb's from Ohio. Kyler's from Arizona. Maybe they visited Iowa at the same time or know each other from some other place. But anyways, who do we want to follow after Saturday? Is the Oregon spring thing televised on a national network?
Technically, yes. In practicality, no. Meaning it's the Pac-12 network that nobody gets.
All right.
That I used to get, but yeah.
Why don't you get it anymore?
I moved.
Well, I would buy it. I would get it. I would invest in it because it's why? Wait a minute. Why
it's going to be defunct in about 3 weeks?
Why would the Pac-12 network be carrying Oregon spring game? They're not in the Pac-12.
This has been a discussion point. The Pac-12 is carrying all of their 2023 teams spring games, USC included. All of them.
That's crazy. Why?
It is crazy. Because they can make as much money as possible. That's probably one of their last chances to recoup some portion of money rather than releasing those schools to the Big Ten network.
Yeah.
I'm sure the Big Ten network would love to show Oregon and USC's spring games.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure I'm sure that's, well, I don't know, that's kept people subscribed to the Pac-12 network, but is there going to be a Pac-12 network once we hit July?
I don't believe so. I think
So
they
it's just
shut down after
they're just
softball and
they're
baseball
just
season.
what will be the last thing they have on their network? Like, what how does a network end? I don't think I've ever seen the end of a network or witnessed that. How does a network end? Does somebody sign off? Like, how does that work?
If they could give me some kind of guarantee of a basement of audience, I would be more than happy to take an hour to close down the network and give my appraisal of how that conference was run for the past 10 or 15 years.
But correct me if I'm wrong, there still is going to be a championship game between Washington State and Oregon State.
They're playing in the regular season.
Okay, but that's not on Pac-12 network because there's no Pac. So what network is that going to be on?
I don't
Is
know
what I'm
how they
asking.
would play a championship game.
Well, isn't the Pac-12 still technically in existence?
It is.
Okay,
It
that's
is.
not. That's what I'm saying. I'm curious of how what channel, like, I'm assuming like ESPN will pick that up or some random network will actually pick it up, or they already have
Some random network.
some ESPN or some random network.
Okay. Oregon State and Washington State play the second to last week of the season.
Okay.
So it's a regularly scheduled game. I wouldn't think that they would need to play again. But maybe as a technicality, they will play for the Pac-12 championship
What?
for one game.
I hope not. That would be so pathetic. That would be so pathetic if that happens. Let's hope it doesn't. So what is the Pac-12? Can the Pac-12? Is there no? You've talked about realignment a lot more than I have. Is there just no survival of the Pac-12? Can't they just grab a bunch of Mountain West teams, or is the Mountain West just that much more valuable now than the Pac-12?
So the end result, whether the Pac-12, Pac-2 would technically grab all those Mountain West programs and bring them into their framework or vice versa, the end result is the same collection of programs. So since the Mountain West is healthy and thriving and established, I would think that those schools are not going to, of course, 2 years ago, those schools would have loved to have been wined and dined by the Pac-12 at the time to go join that league. But why would you join? The end result's the same thing. So I would
Yeah.
think that just the Mountain West is going to just survive. And
It would come down to legalities, right?
yeah,
So
there are legalities going on all over the place. The ACC is in court practically every couple of days against Clemson and Florida State in 4 different locations right now. And the Big Ten may be the beneficiary of that. We shall see. We've got a Nebraska live show coming up at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So in just about a half hour, Justin Adams and myself get together. And also, I wanted to highlight that Steve Dace is stopping by on Wednesday at 4. So that's 4 Eastern on the main channel to talk about who knows what. I'm sure Michigan and other items.
I'm sure Steve can figure out something to talk about.
Oh, yes. He never's short on words. But they're usually pretty wise. So we enjoy talking to Steve. It's always a good time. People show up for that. If they don't show up for me, they show up for Steve. So, all right, Corey, what's going on there at the from the Hawkeye of the Storm?
I did post a video, kind of my breakdown of the Deacon Hill decision. If anybody's curious to watch that over on the channel, I'll be posting a Cale Vanderbush video, likely sometime in the next probably 12 to 18 hours. I can't guarantee it tonight, but that brings us down to 87 scholarships, as I mentioned earlier. And then we'll see if anybody else enters the portal. So I guess just keep it locked in, have notifications turned on so you know when people are entering the portal or visiting Iowa. We'll see how this visit from this young man from Missouri State, this wide receiver, goes. Raylan Sharp. And yeah, we'll have a podcast here soon too with a future football player. We'll be joining Iowa in the summer.
As we bid adieu to Deacon Hill, my question to you, what was Deacon Hill's greatest moment as a Hawkeye?
He made it. Well, I don't know if I could pin it down to one. He made a couple of nice plays. One might have been, well, I just wouldn't be able to tell you what game it was. Maybe against Michigan State at home, where he was going to go down for the sack, and I believe he shoveled the ball with his hand on the ground to keep his body up and shoveled the ball for a completion to avoid the sack. And I made it clear. That's one thing I really appreciated about Deacon Hill, Mark. Say what you want about Deacon Hill's accuracy, whatnot. Not only was he a really good leader, but I do think he was tougher on the. He demonstrated better toughness than Spencer Petras had at Iowa. Like, yeah, he fumbled the ball at times, but Spencer would go down for anything. And I thought Deacon, big guy, right? But I thought he was tough. He got hit in the mouth, Mark. That line wasn't good last year either. He got hit in the mouth. What did he do? He always popped back up. So I got respect for Deacon Hill from that standpoint. And he's a tough guy and filled a role when Iowa desperately needed a warm body. And I wish him all the best going forward.
His best game statistically was the Rutgers game. 20 of 31, 223 yards, a touchdown, and a pick.
Well, that's an outlier. 221 yards. That's a lot, Mark. 221 yards for an Iowa quarterback. What was his lowest output? Was it like 20 yards?
So in terms of games he started, well, you got the Tennessee game, 56 yards. Nebraska 94, Northwestern 66, Wisconsin 6 of 14, 37 yards.
There it is.
That's it.
Maybe Iowa was like, during that game, they were like looking at the Northwestern sideline and saying, "There's Brendan Sullivan. We wish we had him right now." That might have happened. That game was
I remember you making the point, and it sounded ridiculous when it first came out of your mouth, but then I thought, okay, he's right. He is right. When you said during that Wisconsin game, it got to a point where Iowa just didn't even want to get the first down.
Well,
just get off the field on third down and punt.
Yes, that's what the offense is at times. And it was at that game where I finally came to the realization that Kirk actually knows what he's doing here. Now, it's ridiculous that he had to do it, but like I finally understood, okay, Kirk actually is doing the logical thing given the circumstances. It's ridiculous that we're in these circumstances, but he's doing the logical thing because we're not capable of doing anything else.
Yes. There's a greater chance that they're going to turn over the ball and do something that Wisconsin's going to score than they are going to score themselves.
And remember, Iowa won that game up in Madison. That was a good win. Best win of the season, Mark, I think.
Yep. Yeah. The Michigan State might have been the most exciting game.
Iowa State was also in the running for best game of the season. That was a good win on the road, and that was before Cade went down.
He threw for 120 against Michigan, but threw it up there 32 times. So that's a lot of attempts to get 120 yards.
Yes, it is.
All right, folks, we do appreciate you being here. We do this with Corey each and every Tuesday. So make it a habit. Bring some friends with you. 1, 2, 50, 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 where it counts there in Iowa City every Tuesday. We'll see you back here next week, folks.